Okay, thank you. So I will first start with a very basic introduction about the COVID virus and coronavirus, because then it will be much easier for us to understand. Yeah. Now all of you are very familiar with this shape, the coronavirus, and it is actually not an animal, it's a particle which can infect humans and maybe other animals. If you take viruses fall in two main categories based on the nucleic material that is within the virus. We call either RNA viruses or DNA viruses. That is based on the type of nucleic material or the genetic material that it has, ribonucleic acid or nucleonucleic acid. If we take coronavirus, it falls into RNA virus category because the genetic material within the virus is RNA. And uh, generally, colloquial terms, we call it coronavirus because you can see these spiky particles that are coming up, jutting out of the virus surface. They are protein molecules, which we call spike proteins. Because of that, it has this particular shape of a crown. That's why in Latin we call it corona. But scientifically, it is called, WHO has initially named it as COVID-19 because this has led to the coronavirus infectious disease started in late 2019. The scientific name is called SARS-CoV-2. SARS is the severe acute respiratory syndrome, but previously also there was SARS virus, coronavirus, that was SARS coronavirus 1. Therefore, this is called SARS-CoV-2. Okay, so that's the basic introduction about the name and the structure. Now you can see this genetic material. You can see this genetic material that are around. This is RNA. And then you can see this outer capsule covering this RNA. This outer capsule is actually made of lipids and proteins. That is why there is the advice that when you wash with soap or alcohol, that can kill the virus because it can dissolve this lipid protein membrane. All right. And these proteins that are jutting out, again very important because these are the particles or the protein particles that the virus uses to get and attach to another cell. Because as I have mentioned, virus is a particle. It cannot proliferate outside cells. To proliferate, they have to get into a cell. So that is why this spiky protein is very important. Later, this will be very important for you to understand how the disease happens and also the vaccine works. The cells, and then again, it proliferates within the body. And this leads to a complex pathophysiological process which lead to the disease process. At the same time, the immune mechanism of the body will identify this pathogen or the virus and will produce a proteins called antibodies. Those antibodies can later attack the virus if it comes again. That is what we call the immunity. Okay. So this is the pathophysiological process, how this disease happens, especially within the lung, in a very simplified way. If you take the timeline of this disease, once the infection gets into the human respiratory tract, there is a time period, an incubation period till we get the disease, about 2 days to 2 weeks. And then the virus are replicating within the body in the same mechanism I have mentioned. And slowly the symptoms start. Initially mild. Actually, most are asymptomatic. But some, about maybe 20% might go into severe illness. And another smaller percentage might go into more critical illness, needing ICU care. So this is the rough timeline of the disease. So how the COVID vaccination works or it helps. As it was previously mentioned, I think Mr. Amarasuri also mentioned that vaccination is an important tool, but it is one of the tools in controlling this epidemic. How does it helps in preventing the spread? This is where we need to understand the concept of herd immunity. Now look at this diagram. This person is infected. Others are not immune. They don't have antibodies in their blood. So what happens? Since COVID virus can spread very fast, okay, one person might be able to infect maybe 2 to 5 more people. Within short time, the whole community get the infection, similar to what is happening in Sri Lanka at the moment. But if few people are infected, then this slows down. Then this process slows down. So there's a little difference between first and this diagram, this picture, because there are some people who haven't got the infection because they have got the immunity. But still, majority have got the infections because it's very contagious. Here what has happened? This person is infected. But in this community, a lot of people are immune. Either they have got the vaccine or they have got the infection previously. Therefore, they have the antibodies within the body so that even if the virus enters, they can fight off that virus. Therefore, this community, the spread is very limited, very restricted. This is what we call the herd immunity. It goes like a herd, like a community, whole community. And for a vaccine to stop the spread, it need a particular level, particular high level, as you can see from this, a particular high level of herd immunity. Now, if you take different diseases that spread very fast, like smallpox, which can spread to 5 to 7 people from one, need very high level of herd immunity. About 85% of the population need to be immunized. If you take SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19, again, spreading rather fast. Therefore, it needs high level of herd immunity. So this makes a challenge because no point of vaccinating few people, no point of few people being immune. If you are to reach herd immunity and stop the transmission almost completely, you need a very high level of vaccination or immunization. That is something that we need to keep in mind. Then how this vaccine development happens. Now, when this threat came, scientists world over, they have started this vaccine development process in several countries. There are about 70 projects or even more than that working on developing the COVID vaccine. And generally, the traditional approach in developing a vaccine is rather complex. Initially, the vaccine is developed and initially tested on animals. And once that is successful, it takes about 2 to 4 years traditionally. Then they are tested on humans. Initially, small number of people called phase 1 trial. Then another small number of people for another 2 years, phase 2 trial. And then very large number of people, phase 3 trial. Then all these trials have been successful related to the efficacy of the vaccine and the safety. Then only it is submitted for official approval of the official authorities like the Food and Drug Association Authority of USA. In Sri Lanka, it's the National Medicinal Drug Regulatory Authority. WHO also approves the vaccines for use. And WHO guidance is very important. Then only it moves into large-scale production. Now you may see this process takes about 15 years or longer because it has to be a very rigorous process, very carefully assessed because safety is very important. But when it comes to coronavirus, it was developed within say less than 2 years. How did it happen? it is not by omitting any of these stages. What has happened here is there was overlapping. That's how the whole process has been shortened to about 1.5 years. Initially, the animal trials laboratory, then phase 1 starts, but before phase 1 finishes, phase 2 trials started. And then phase 3. And while this was going on, the industry started producing vaccines and the regulatory approval process. So how this very complex process was shortened was by overlapping. And the approval again is different from the routine approval, which can take very long time because it's an emergency. So in here, what the WHO gives is the emergency approval for use, because what we are going through is a crisis and an emergency. So you can't wait longer. Having said that, still WHO and other regulatory authorities will have to go through the necessary documents, and until they are satisfied with the basic minimum safety regulations, they will not be approved. Which is fair enough, because this is something that we insert into our body and it might have some complications. So therefore, you cannot compromise on safety. So even for emergency approval, there are certain documentation and the procedures that WHO and other regulatory authorities will follow. Okay. So this is the development process. How this vaccine generally works. How this works is by activating our immune system to produce antibodies, which are actually proteins which can fight against this virus, or what we call pathogen. During immunization, we basically train our immune system to identify particles from this pathogen. Those particles we call antigens, because they can stimulate the immune process of our body and thereby production of antibodies, which can fight the virus later. So this is how it happens. Generally, the antigen that is used is this spike protein, generally, this protein molecule. And we train our immune system to identify this pathogen, and next time when it enters, to fight against it. This is somewhat similar to say there may be international criminals. Their identities and details may be given, maybe electronic fingerprints may be given to the airport authorities. So the airport authorities are trained to identify them. And if these people try to enter the country through the airport, then immigration officers can identify them through the system and act against them. This is somewhat similar. We train our immune system to identify these particles or the pathogens and then produce antibodies. This is a simple mechanism. Again, I'll try to oversimplify this. Through immunization, particles of viral proteins are entered, what we call antigen. They are identified by our immune system and activate the cells that produce these proteins called antibodies. They can go and bind to the virus next time and destroy it. So that is how it works. In immunization, we train our immune system to identify this antigen and produce antibodies. This is how it happens. However, once the vaccine is given, this immune response happens. But as time goes on, this memory goes down, because those cells have a particular lifespan. This memory goes down. That's why once the first dose is given, you need to give a booster. Then this memory reaches a higher baseline and remains for a longer time. That is why we need to give 2 doses. One first dose, second booster dose for most of the vaccines, because we need to keep this immune memory for a long time in order to be effective. Okay, so I'll try to explain how few different vaccines actually work. Now, previously I have mentioned that most of the vaccines actually use this spike protein as the identifier to be recognized by the immune system and take action. Why? Because the spike protein is the threatening component, because it is through that the virus enters the human body and attach into the cells. So this is very important. How the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, or which was introduced to Sri Lanka as COVID initially from India, how this works is, in the vaccine, the genetic part or the DNA component that can produce, we know that the genes are the ones that produce proteins. So the genetic sequence that is responsible for producing this protein is entered into the human body through the vaccine. How it is entered through the vaccine is because since it's a genetic part of a gene, it can't just be inserted into human body. It has to be put into another vehicle or a vector. In Oxford vaccine, or similarly in Sputnik, what happens is this genetic part or the DNA part that is responsible for producing this protein is inserted into a harmless virus, what we call chimpanzee adenovirus, which is harmless to humans. So through the vaccine, it enters the human body, then the genetic component released, and it produces the proteins. And our immune system can identify those proteins and later produce antibodies. This is how it works. It is generally believed to be having an efficacy of 82%. What is meant by this is, when compared with a group where this vaccine was not given, the group that had the vaccine has 82% of less chance in developing severe disease. Mind you, severe disease. Still they might develop the asymptomatic, but they have very much less chance of developing the severe disease. Okay, so that is how Oxford vaccine works. Then one of the initial vaccines were Moderna, introduced by US. Similarly, the Pfizer vaccine works almost the same way. Here, it introduces the RNA particle. Many of us know that RNAs are the ones that produce the protein ultimately. RNA sequence will tell what would be the protein sequence for a particular molecule or a particle. So here what happens is, again, like the previously DNA, this time RNA, it cannot be just given to the body. It has to be encoded into a nanoparticle. So within this nanoparticle, the RNA particle is inserted to the human body, RNA released, and proteins produced, and the immune response starts. And this is believed to be higher efficacy. But again, there are no studies that have compared the different vaccines together. So the way the efficacy was measured here is different from the way efficacy was measured in COVID. So you can't really compare just numbers. What we can see is all these vaccines have higher efficacy. What is meant by efficacy is that those who have taken the vaccine have 94% of less chance of getting the severe disease. Okay, Pfizer also works in the same way. And if you take the Sinopharm, or previously another version was Sinovac, their mechanism is different. Now, Covishield or AstraZeneca used the DNA. Moderna used RNA. Here, the Chinese vaccine used much simpler approach of using the killed virus itself. Killed virus itself. In the previous two, it's not the virus. It is only they allow the protein to be generated within the body. But the Sinopharm, it is what is used is the killed virus. It enters the body and gets destroyed within the body, but those protein particles are identified and the immunity happens. The efficacy seems to be somewhat less than the other vaccines, but again, it depends on how the efficacy was measured. Okay. When you compare, say, most of these need 2 doses. They produce strong immune response. The Oxford AstraZeneca, maintaining the vaccine is easier, regular fridge temperature. Similarly, Sputnik and the Sinopharm. But Pfizer and Moderna, they need very low temperatures like minus 70 degrees. So therefore, logistically, it's much easier to use these vaccines in Sri Lankan conditions, because without these temperatures, the vaccine efficacy will be down. Ultimately, what I want to mention is that for vaccine to reach the level or the herd immunity that can completely stop the spread of the epidemic is very high. You need to immunize about, say, 85%, 90% of the community. We are long way off at the moment. Currently, Sri Lanka uses 3 vaccines, Covishield, and then the Sinopharm and Sputnik. Up to now, from Covishield, about 900 people have been vaccinated given the first dose, and out of those, about 350,000 given a second dose. If you take Sinopharm, again, another 350,000 like given that, and Sputnik, rather small, about 14,000 doses. So that is, if you take the whole Sri Lankan population, about 6.1% of the whole Sri Lankan population has got at least 1 dose. Research has shown that even 1 dose will provide some immunity, but not full immunity. Only about 1.2 in Sri Lankan population has got the 2 doses, full vaccination. You can see it's a very small percentage compared to the level that we should be reaching. So what does that tell you? We are long way off, and there's no way that we can forget other measures. Another thing that we need to remember is vaccine will protect you. There may be side effects, but serious side effects are actually rare. They are, but comparably rare. So when it comes to the risk and benefit, the benefit of the vaccine, regardless of whether it is Covishield or Sputnik or Sinopharm, the benefit is much higher than the risk that we are taking. That is the undertaking that is taken by the World Health Organization. There may be a small risk, but the benefit is much higher. It may not be completely prevent you from getting the infection. Sometimes, even if you have got the vaccine, you might get the disease, but the severity would be much less. That we have to remember. Again, the take-home message that even if you take the vaccine, you can't forget. You can forget the other measures. Another important thing that we need to remember is all over the world, the vaccines are at short supply. And mainly a lot of rich countries, they have filled their stocks and they have actually purchased the larger percentage of world's vaccines. Therefore, poorer countries or economically deprived countries, they find a lot of challenge, lot of difficulties in getting enough vaccine for their countries. Same with Sri Lanka. And also with the current situation in India, it has become even more challenging. I believe the government is trying their very best to get the vaccine for the country and to try to immunize. And I got to know that there are plans to get down some more doses in the coming month in June. So we hope it will work out, and hopefully we should be able to immunize more and more in our population. But having said that, again, in the current situation, the herd immunity target is somewhat way off. In that case, we have to go for a prioritized plan for vaccination. For example, what should be our objective of vaccination? Is it achieving herd immunity? At the moment, it seems a distant target. Is it to protect at-risk population? Yes, I think it should be one of the targets. In that case, priority should be given to those who are at risk, like the elderly or who are having other diseases, because they are the people who might get it, who might be having more serious disease and might have more serious complications. And also those who are mostly in contact with having disease, like the health workers and others who are involved in disease control, like the security forces and public health workforce, so on and so forth. So at the moment, the option seemed to be that going for a prioritized vaccine rollout. Another thing that we need to remember is that there's a lot of keenness to obtain vaccine. I think it's very good because vaccine is very important. We must have the vaccine. But the challenge is that it's not easy to reach this 90% target. What we need to remember is not the current mindset. The current mindset is if I get the vaccine, I'll be safe. We have to move towards the mindset that if all the necessary or the required people get the vaccine, all of us will be safe. Because even if you get the vaccine, others who haven't got might get the disease and they might even develop maybe resistant strains, and we are not safe in that way. Therefore, our mindset should be, let's get this vaccination program successful. If all of us are vaccinated, all of us will be safe. And try to give our fullest support for this vaccination program to be successful. At the same time, we cannot forget the basic preventive measures because they have to go hand in hand if we are to succeed in controlling this epidemic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Indika Karnatilaka, for that very illustrative presentation. Now, if I were to summarize what he presented, in මහාචාර්ය කරුණාතිලක විසින් හඳුන්වා දුන්නා මේ වෛරසය පිළිබඳව. ඊළඟට මේ වෛරසය තුලින් ප්‍රතිශක්තිකරණය ඇතිවන ක්‍රියාදාමය ශරීරය තුල, ඊළඟට වෛරසයට විරුද්ධව නොයෙකුත් එන්නත් වර්ග ලෝකයේ ප්‍රදේශ රාශියක රටවල් රාශියක සිද්ධ වෙන බවත් ඒ ක්‍රියාදාමය පැහැදිලි කරා. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් එන්නතක් නිර්මාණය කරන් නිෂ්පාදනය කළා භාවිතයට ගන්නට අවුරුදු 10ක් 15ක් විතර යනවා එන්නතක් භාවිතයට ගන්නට පරිශන මට්ටමේ ඉවර වෙලා. නමුත් මෙම එන්නත අපිට අවුරුදු එකමාරක් ඇතුළත නිර්මාණය කර ගන්නට නිෂ්පාදනය කරගෙන අනුමැතිය ලබා ගන්නට පුළුවන්කමක් ලැබුණේ ඒ ක්‍රියාදාමයේ පියවරන් එකක් ආහාර වෙන්නට ඉස්සෙල්ලා අනිත් පියවර ආරම්භ කිරීම වගේ මේ අඩු කිරීම තුලින් තමයි මේ වනට එන්නත ලබා ගන්නට ඇති. ඉන්පසුව එතුමන් පැහැදිලි කරා කොහොමද මේ එන්නත දුන්නාට පස්සේ ශරීරය තුල ප්‍රතිශක්තිය ඇතිවන්නේ කියලා. ප්‍රතිශක්තිය ඇතිවන්නේ කෙසේද කියන එක පිළිබඳවත් ඊළඟට ඒ වගේම වැදගත්කම විශේෂයෙන්ම මේ herd immunity කියන එක ජනතාවේ අවම ප්‍රමාණයකට ප්‍රමාණවත් ප්‍රතිශතයන් ලැබුණොත් රෝගය පැතිරීම අවම වෙන විදිහ ඔහු පැහැදිලි කරා. ඒ නිසා විශේෂයෙන්ම මේ එන්නතටත් 80%කට එහා පැත්තේ ඒ ජනතාව එන්නත ලබා දිය යුතු වෙනවා ඒ හර්ඩ් ඉමුනිටි එක ඇති කර ගන්නට. ඊළඟට ඔහු සාකච්ඡා කරා මේ එන්නත දීම පිළිබඳව ඒ වැදගත්කමත් ඒ වගේම එන්නත් වර්ග අතර වල තිබෙන විශේෂයෙන්ම බොහොමයක් එන්නත් අපිට ලංකාවේ පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන්කම ලැබිලා තිබෙන ඒවා පවත්වාගෙන යා යුතු නියමිත උෂ්ණත්වයක් තිබෙනවා. ඒ නිසා සමහර එන්නත් අපිට ඉතා අඩු උෂ්ණත්වයක පවත්වා ගන්නට එයාට සඳහා තියෙන පහසුකම් අඩු නිසා ඒව පාවිච්චි කරන්න අපහසු බවත් ඔහු පැහැදිලි කළ දුන්නා. ඒ වගේම මේ අවසාන වශයෙන් ඔහු කියා සිටියේ මේ එන්නත් කරණය වගේම අපගේ අනිකුත් නිවාරණ කටයුතු රෝග වළක්වා ගැනීමට ගන්නා පියවරයන් ඉතාමත් වැදගත් වන බව. Then කැමති next is our question and answer session. ඔබට යම් කිසි ගැටලුවක් ප්‍රශ්නයක් තිබෙනවා නම් අහන්නට පුළුවන්. ඔබට ඔබ unmute කර අහන්න පුළුවන්. You can unmute and ask the question or you can type your question in the chat box.
Yes.
Doctor, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
If somebody get the first one, for example, Sinopharm one, then second vaccine is sometimes we can't get the same vaccine. Is it okay for the person?
Okay. Currently, there are no official recommendations for mixing the vaccines currently. Even though there are some research available from some countries where they have mixed some vaccines and they have got some positive results. But at the moment, there is no official recommendation from WHO or from any other authoritative body that you can mix the vaccines. So as it stands at the moment, if you have got one particular vaccine in the first dose, then you have to get the same vaccine in the second dose. That's the current situation. Later, the recommendations might change as more and more evidence comes in. But at the moment, that is the current situation.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, can I ask, Doctor? I'm Lanwa here.
Yep.
Professor, now question is now certain people have got the first vaccine done. For the second vaccine, certain people, most of the people have been given a date to come and get the vaccine, but still the people who have got the first vaccine has not got their second vaccine on the particular date. Will it be there any impact to that patient? Like, do they, as you said, there is a reminding per time and everything. Will there any problems for that particular person who has not got the second vaccine?
No, there will not be problems. The only question that arises is, will there be reduction of immunity? At the moment, there is no particular evidence to say that. For example, initially it was believed that for AstraZeneca, you get the first dose and after about 4 weeks, you give the second dose. But later there was evidence coming that if you make it longer, the gap longer, the immune response becomes stronger. Like how it was explained is that immune system have more time to develop more and more lymphocytes and maybe immune memory, so immune response would be longer. So that's why, based on that recommendation, in Sri Lanka, the initial suggested gap of 4 weeks was later extended into about 9 weeks, sorry. And some countries, the suggestion was about 12 weeks. So again, the current data is there will not be a significant drop. And once the second dose is given, then the booster starts and the immune memory picks up. So if there is a delay in few days or 1 week, there should not be a big problem as far as AstraZeneca is concerned. As far as AstraZeneca is concerned. When it comes to Sinopharm, what the current evidence says is the gap between the first dose and the second one is about 3 weeks. It should be around 3 weeks, maybe 3 to 4 weeks. And you get the optimum immunity few weeks, maybe about 2 weeks after second dose. When it compared to AstraZeneca, research evidence says that after first dose also, it gives some evidence, some immunity, some protection. After second dose, the protection becomes better. So when it comes to Covishield to AstraZeneca, the delay doesn't matter very much. Even if you have got one dose, that will give you some immunity. But the current research evidence related to Sinopharm is better to take it within the stipulated time period, because the immunity development based on current development takes about 2 weeks after the second dose. Okay, so that is the current evidence. So what I can say is, even if you have got at least one dose, there's some immunity will be there. But ideally, you need to get 2 doses within the current stipulated time period. I hope I have made it clearer.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
දැන් පළවෙනි මාත්‍රාව ගත්තට පස්සේ දෙවෙනි මාත්‍රාව ගැනීම අතර යම් කාල පරිච්ඡේදයක් තියෙනවා. AstraZeneca ගන්නකොට ලංකාවේ ගත්ත කාල පරිච්ඡේදය සති 9ක් විතර වුණා. පළවෙනි එක ගත්තට පස්සේ යම් ප්‍රමාණයක ප්‍රතිශක්තියක් අගේ පවතිනවා. දෙවෙනි එක ගත්තට පස්සේ ඒක වැඩි වෙනවා. ඒතකොට දෙවෙනි එක ගන්න පොඩ්ඩක් පරක්කු වුණා කියලා ලොකු ප්‍රශ්නයක් ඇති වෙන්නේ නැහැ. බයි Sinopharm එන්න තියෙනම් දැනට තියෙන දත්ත අනුව පළවෙනි එක අරන් සති 3ක් හෝ 4ක් ඇතුළත දෙවෙනි එක අරගත්තට පස්සේ තමයි ප්‍රතිශක්තිය ඇති වෙන්නේ. ඉතින් ওই කරුණු ටික තමයි මතක තියාගන්න වෙන්නේ. මෙතන අපේ පාලනින් පිට කරුණු ගණනාවක් තියෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ කොහොමද රටට අවශ්‍ය වැක්සින් ප්‍රමාණය ලබා ගන්න, ඉක්මනට ලබා ගන්න කියන එක.
Yeah, I do have 2 questions, Professor. Can I ask now?
Yes.
Yeah. One is that when a COVID patient got the immunity or they produce their own antibodies, whether they need to take back this vaccination, if they want to take the vaccination again, when it should be, how many weeks after the positive reactions. And the other question is, we all know that everyone, though they are coming from developed countries or developing countries, they are human beings. So the WHO is basically supporting for almost all the countries. So if the developing countries does not get sufficient vaccination, the developed countries get the sufficient, having some kind of priority, why can't we make this process faster? As you mentioned that you shorten the process following all the regulations, but can't we produce this than what we have at the moment doing? So then even the developing countries can get the benefit to develop this herd immunity. So these 2 questions, can you please answer?
Yeah. Okay. Now regarding the yes, even if you had COVID, if you got infected, still it is better to get the vaccine. True that once you have got the infection, there will be some immunity, some antibody production. But again, what data shows is the immunity that is given by the vaccine is much stronger than the immunity that is given by the disease. Because another thing is, in the disease, you are infected by a particular strain or a variety, because there are so many varieties of COVID. Now there are you call the Indian one or the UK strain, so on and so forth. There are many varieties. Therefore, once you take the vaccine, it gives the protection for many varieties. Therefore, even if you had COVID, you need to get the vaccine, better to get the vaccine. But there need to be some gap, about 6 weeks gap after being diagnosed. Yeah. Then, secondly, already WHO is very much aware and concerned about this issue of vaccine diplomacy, and powerful countries, basically, they are stockpiling the vaccines and then depriving the other countries. Therefore, WHO also has, I think Dr. Samaragi is also very much aware, a collaboration called COVAX. That COVAX collaboration, basically, that is basically ensure that the vaccine distribution and the deployment is equal and fair and equitable. And they basically try to purchase the vaccines in bulk to make sure that the other countries get them in equitable way. So WHO is trying their best, but again, having said that, vaccine production is a challenging process. It takes time, it's expensive, there's a lot of vaccine diplomacy, and there is a lot of commercialization there. All these challenges are there, it takes time, but WHO is trying their very best.
Well, Sri Lanka, there is no facility to do that, no?
Sri Lanka is also part of the COVAX. I mean, they are also part of the COVAX facility. So WHO is trying to support them also. But
vaccine production procedures is not available in Sri Lanka.
Very complex, and there are a lot of safety regulations. And I mean, there were some talks about Sri Lanka producing the Chinese vaccine. But I think we need to achieve much higher level of, say, technical expertise if we are to think about
animal vaccines are producing, no, by the veterinary department?
Not many. I mean, there may be some, but not many, because most of the vaccines that we are using in Sri Lanka are actually imported from India, mainly from the Serum Institute of India, where we got the Covishield also. But at the moment, the Serum Institute of India is also in a rather compromised position due to current situation.
Thank you very much. Professor?
Professor, I am Chandani.
It's not clear.
Not clear. The voice.
Yeah.
Hello, sir. Yes. I have a small question. Most of our healthcare workers received 2 doses of AstraZeneca. I mean, after receiving the second dose, even how long we are considered to be protective? I mean, do we need a third dose to boost, or when we need it?
Again, I mean, since it's only less than a few months that the vaccination rollout has started, no, so there is no real data to say how long this immunity will stay. I mean, it's unlikely to be lifelong because, I mean, RNA viruses, they very commonly mutate and new strains are coming. That's why in developed countries, the influenza vaccine has to be given every year. So nobody really knows how long it will last. So hopefully maybe a few months to 1 year. If that time duration, that duration is achieved, I think it would be enough to contain the current situation. So very unlikely it will be lifelong, hopefully few months to 1 year, hopefully.
There are a few people who have raised their hands. I will take some of them, and then we have some chat box questions also. Past Governor Chandani, you have a question?
Professor, I'd like to ask now, you were talking about the COVID, the AstraZeneca. Now you say that the immunity it develops better when it's longer. But does it apply to the over 60 people also, or it's only for the younger people?
No, it should apply to everyone. It should apply to everyone because that's about the immune system. No, it should apply to everyone. I'm not sure whether there's specific data for over 60. I don't think so, but it should apply to everyone.
Okay, because the other is more risky people, so that's
why.
Yeah.
So yeah, true. I think we have to go by what is available evidence. So the current evidence says is that a gap of about 10 weeks will give a stronger immunity. So that's the current evidence available. So probably we have to go by that evidence.
Right. Thank you, Professor.
Then Devika Gunawardana has
Dr. Samaragi, I am Dr. Gunawardana speaking.
Yes.
Professor, I have a question that we recently observed that there have been many deaths among the pregnant mothers who have had this COVID. Now, do you recommend this vaccination for the pregnant mothers? Or if so, what's the make? Is it AstraZeneca, Sinopharm, or the Sputnik, or the Pfizer one?
Okay, yeah. If you take any of these, there isn't enough data. There isn't enough data regarding the use on pregnant mothers, because during the initial trials, they were not included in most of the phase 3 trials. Again, due to the emergency situation, and also because the testing on pregnant mothers take much longer time, because you don't know about the say different kind of impact that it can have on the fetus, so on and so forth. So therefore, testing on pregnant mothers, even in routine process, takes a longer time. Therefore, there is not enough data. There is some data, but there's not enough data available to give a guarantee. So what WHO says is, it doesn't say not to give. It doesn't say not to give. What it says is, if the benefits outweigh the risk, then to give. So that is what is applicable for pregnant mothers.
Yeah,
At the moment, there is no recommendation to give it to all pregnant mothers. So it has to be case by case basis, based on the risk and the benefit. That is what the WHO current recommendation.
Professor,
Why?
one more.
Because
Yeah, that you said that some of the vaccine contain DNA, other one RNA. Can it affect the development of the fetus if it is given in the first trimester?
I don't think so. I don't think so, because those genetic material, they are just entering the human body and producing only the proteins.
Yeah.
They enter the human cells and produce only the protein particles, not the active virus. Or it can't get into the human genome and then make changes. It doesn't happen in that way.
Okay, thank you.
Because active virus is not entered to the body. Even in Sinopharm, it's a dead virus. So it is unlikely in that way. But having said that, at the moment, there are no adequate data regarding the widespread use of that on pregnant mothers. That's why at the moment, WHO and other authorities are rather cautious and advise risk and benefit.
Dr. Gandeepan, you want to answer a question? You have raised your hand. Go ahead.
Yes, I sent a message also. Thank you very much, sir, for your informative this presentation to us. I am a postgraduate trainee in medical administration at the moment. I am Dr. Kandivan speaking. This is regarding one of the country I read it in Seychelles, that they have given vaccination to the country where almost 71% got first vaccination and 62% got both vaccination. But still, after with this vaccination, the country in the new they got new COVID patients. Among those vaccinations, those are around 20% new cases and 37% new hospital admissions. Both the first and second doses have been vaccinated people got the Sinopharm and the AstraZeneca, which we also got in Sri Lanka. So is it advisable to continue the vaccination for Sri Lankans with the AstraZeneca and Sinopharm, or do we need to consider to get it Pfizer or Moderna, which looks more efficacy in UK and Americans? They didn't get new cases as at the moment with the data.
Okay, yeah, this what has happened in Seychelles has raised a lot of concern within a WHO and other authorities also. So superficially looking, it's very concerning, because as you said, about more than 70% got either AstraZeneca or Sinopharm, and many have got 2 doses. Still, there was an epidemic that has started after that. But it gives us several lessons. One thing we have to remember is we should not be trying to interpret based on the raw numbers only, because that might lead to some misinterpretation also. One thing we have to remember is Seychelles is a very small country. The population is much smaller. So the numbers, even though we talk about high percentages of 70% or so, the numbers are much smaller. The numbers are much smaller to derive that kind of conclusion compared to, say, millions of people who have been given the vaccine all over the world. The number that have got in Seychelles are maybe less than 100,000 or so. The numbers are much smaller. So that is one thing we have to keep in mind. Other thing is, rather than going by raw numbers, we have to analyze the situation. Now, when AstraZeneca and those vaccines were introduced, it was clearly mentioned what it prevents is a severe disease. They might still get the disease, asymptomatic disease, because now when the virus enters the nasal cavity, still the virus can colonize the nasal cavity before getting into the bloodstream. So someone who had the vaccine still might get the viruses into their body through the respiratory route and can spread others. They also might or might not get asymptomatic disease. So what we have to see is, out of those who have got the disease, how many were hospitalized? And out of those who haven't got the vaccine, how many were hospitalized? And how many were asymptomatic? That will give us a clearer picture. The information that I have got is, when you analyze in depth, still it shows that the benefit is more. Even though the numbers are small, the benefit is more. So we had to be very careful in interpreting these situations. I mean, the baseline message is the benefits far outweigh the risk.
Okay.
Hope I have clarified. It's a rather complex situation, but hope I have clarified.
And there are two questions on vaccine production and safety on the chat box. One question is, as you explained, that the process of development of vaccines has been expedited following a process that overlapped phases 1, 2, and 3. Do you see any negative impact of such shortened process? If so, what are those?
Okay, yeah, it's not actually shortened. It's not shortened. As I have mentioned previously, none of the steps are omitted. None of the steps in producing the vaccine or testing or approval has been omitted. Only thing that has happened is they have been overlapped. Because of that overlap, the shortening happens. Again, having said that, we have to understand the difference between the emergency approval and the routine approval. What we have from WHO and other authorities is the emergency approval. So as the name implies, it's different from the routine approval, which basically rules out to the risk to the extent possible. So what emergency approval says us is the benefits far outweigh the risk. So that's the principle. So this is not to say that there is no risk, but the benefits that we are having by vaccination is far, far higher than the possible risk. And we have to take that risk. And that risk is actually much lesser than the risk that we are taking when we get into the road every day. So that is a difference between emergency approval and routine approval. That's a public health approach.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I think Prof. Samarage, you also can put your inputs because you are a senior.
Right, okay. No, I just want to share 1 minute short 2 videos. We are talking about the vaccine, but people forget about other things. Just I am going to share a couple of short videos that the Health Promotion Bureau has shared. Let's enjoy that and follow that to the later.
මම සමන්ත අපි කොරෝනා වූදුරෙන් මිදන්න අපේ ගෙදරට සැලස්මක් හදාගත්තා. කොරෝනා සම්බන්ධ ඇතිවන ගැටලු සහ අවශ්‍යතාවලට අදාළ සියලු දුරකථනංක සටහන් කර නිවසේ පේන තැනක එල්ලුවා. කර්ෆියු ඉවත් කළා කියලා අපි අනවශ්‍ය ගමන් යන්නේ නැහැ. අත්‍යවශ්‍ය දෙයකට යන්නේ වෙන අසනීප නැති තරුණ මම ගෙදරින් එළියට යනකොට පළඳින ආයිත්තම් අරගෙන යන දේ අවම කළා. මම ආපහු එනකොට සිරප්පු එළියෙන් ගලවලා එළියට ගෙනිච්ච දේවල් දොර ළඟ ගේ ඇතුලේ තියෙන පෙට්ටියකට දානවා. මම හොඳින් අත සෝදනවා. ඇඳන් ගියේ ඇඳුම් ඇඟපත හොඳින් සෝදලා තමයි ගෙදර අය ළඟට යන්නේ. අපි එළවලු වවනවා, ගෙදර පිරිසිදු කරනවා, සින්දු කියනවා, දරුවෝ පාඩම් වැඩත් කරනවා, සෙල්ලනුත් කරනවා. ආගමික වතාවත් අපි ගෙදරම කරනවා. ගෙදර ඉන්න වැඩිහිටි අම්මා, තාත්තා, පවුලේ අය ආරක්ෂා කරගන්න අපි මේ අලුත් ජීවන රටාවට පුරුදු වෙලා ඔබත් පුරුදු වෙන්න. සෞඛ්‍ය ප්‍රවර්තන කාර්යාංශය, යුනිසෙෆ් සහ චයිල්ඩ් ෆන්ඩ් සමග ගෙනෙන පණිවිඩයක්.
Then there's another short one that is the home and can I have the screen sharing? That is at the home, and then there's another one for the office also. Let us see that also, the 1 minute short video, how to behave in the office.
මේ ඉන්නේ සමන්ත. ඔහු කොරෝනා කර්ෆියු අයින් කරයින් පස්සේ රස්සාවට යන්න පටන් ගත්තා. හැබැයි ඔහු සෞඛ්‍ය ආරක්ෂිත උපදෙස් අකුරටම පිළිපැත්තා. ඔහු පුළුවන් හැම විටම සමාජ දුරස්ථභාවයක් පවත්වා ගත්තා. සෞඛ්‍ය උපදෙස් පරිදි නාසය, කට සහ ඇස් අල්ලන්නේ නැතුව ඉන්න සමන්ත මතක තියාගත්තා. කාර්යාලේ පිටතදීම ඔහු හොඳින් සබන් යොදා අත සේදුවා. කාර්යාලය තුලදී ඔහු නිතර ඒ දේ කළා. කාර්යාලයෙන් පිටවීමට පෙරත් සමන්ත සබන් යොදා අත සේදුවා. සමන්ත පුළුවන් හැම විටම සමාජ සම්බන්ධතා දුරින් පැවැත්තුවා. සමන්ත යහළුවන් ඇසුර ටික දවසකට මගහැරියා. ඔහු ගෙදරයි හමුවීමට පෙර හොඳින් සබන් යොදා නාගත්තා. ඔබත් ඔබගේ ආතනියන්ගේත් ආරක්ෂාව ගැන දෙසරයක් හිතන්න. සෞඛ්‍ය ප්‍රවර්ධන කාර්යාංශය යුනිසෙෆ් සමග ගෙනෙන පණිවිඩයක්.
Okay, any more questions?
So one more question from me. Can't even speaking.
Yes.
So this is regarding not the vaccination, regarding the COVID. There is a terminology called long, and I heard there are some clinics happening in UK. Can you elaborate about this long COVID?
So, the question is not clear. Can you come again?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah.
This is regarding some people get long COVID. Then there are some clinics happening in UK also regarding this long COVID. Is it available in Sri Lanka, like long COVID patients?
Okay, you mean the long-term management of COVID? Is that so?
Long COVID means some patients are getting repeated COVID, and sometimes after the COVID infection, they are getting psychological and some effects, and they are following the clinics in foreign country.
Correct. Yeah, I don't think at the moment there is such kind of follow-up plan in Sri Lanka, because at the moment we are going through a crisis and try to contain the immediate spread of this thing. But yes, I mean, when you consider the pathophysiology of COVID, once it affects the lung, it can have different sequelae, so different pathways it can take, and if it goes into that severe stage, then it can affect maybe the lungs, and then lead into some complications in the lung, like say the fibrosis in the lung, which can lead to say constriction of the lung. And those patients, if they survive, they can have long-term complications like difficulties in breathing and a lot of disabilities. Similarly, it can affect other organs like the brain or heart, depending on if the cellular receptors are there, the virus can affect those areas also, and maybe the coagulation system, and might have long-term impact. Yes. So what does this tells us? This tells us even if we don't get symptoms, we can't ignore this disease. True that at the moment it is only 1% who are dying, but about 20% get severe symptoms, and out of that about 5% get critical. And those people are, even if they survive, there is a possibility that they can have long-term consequences. Research findings worldwide are emerging that even after some time, the CT findings in the lungs and other organs, there are pathological findings, and those need to be managed, and even psychological and other things. Yes, it is possible. It's a serious thing that a lot of research need to go into, and we have to look into that also. So we don't know what the future holds for us actually. I mean, even though we are happy that there are so many asymptomatic people, and there are a small number who have got symptoms and recovered, we really don't know about the future. So we have to look into those areas as well.
Then there's another question in the chat box. If someone is unable to get the vaccine second dose in the during the relevant period of that particular vaccine, whether he or she can go for a different vaccine brand.
Yes, the same answer. At the moment, there is no recommendation on mixing, no data and no recommendation. If that official recommendation comes, yes, but so far, no. So at the moment, unfortunately, what we have to do is, I mean, we need to wait till the vaccine comes. Now, there are some attempts to get down, the AstraZeneca from US also, because they are supposed to be having some excess doses. So government is also trying, and it's a matter of, I mean, we have to hope for the best that we should be able to get the second dose. Since at the moment, there are no such recommendation. Definitely, there is no such recommendation that we can mix and match. So let's hope that that we will be getting the vaccine doses soon. But even later, yes, even later getting it better than not having it.
Right. One final question on the chat box. They ask about the side effects, any vaccines currently used in Sri Lanka, and which one is the best out, which gives less side effects.
Okay, yeah. I mean, generally most are tolerated well. I mean, side effects are minimal. Mostly it's like, say, fever, body ache, and pain, malaise, so on and so forth, muscle pain, things like that. And there can be some rare side effects also. Very, very rarely, there can be serious side effects. There were some reported cases of blood clotting, so on and so forth. Therefore, if there is a history of bleeding disorders or clotting, then it becomes a caution. Or if someone has got blood clotting after the first dose, then it's contraindicated to get the second dose in the same. And if there are serious history of serious allergies, not just allergies where you got rashes and all, but if a history of very serious allergy like needing hospitalization and then hydrocortisone injection and other emergency measures, then it becomes a recommendation, contraindication. If you have these problems, it's always better to get the medical advice before getting vaccination. But having said that, serious adverse effects are very rare, very rare. Now, even this risk of clotting, the risk of clotting due to the COVID disease is much higher than the risk due to vaccine. The same information is regarding Sputnik also, but it's not officially confirmed. There are some officially confirmed cases related to AstraZeneca. Basically, what was observed is that Sputnik was somewhat better tolerated than AstraZeneca. AstraZeneca initial dose, those who have got, they know that they have got some, say, body aches and fever, some symptoms. First dose. Second dose was much better tolerated. Sinopharm also, up to now, the observation is very well tolerated. So that's the current situation. Serious side effects are very rare. But what, as responsible citizens, what we need to do is, if we get any kind of symptoms, we need to inform the authorities and take advices. Again, the baseline message is advantage and the benefit is far higher than the risk.
Okay, many more questions are coming up, but time is catching us cutting up. So I need to terminate the question and answer session.
Yeah, Doctor.
Yeah, sure.
Doctor, this is Bindu here.
Yeah. You have a question?
Just to just to check, because I'm having few allergies, doctor.
Yeah.
I just want to know whether it is advisable for me to have the injection, because I'm allergic to Voltaren. I have been having a severe allergy to Voltaren once. So I don't know whether I think I'm having few allergies for some antibiotics as well, but not amoxicillin and stuff. But I really don't. But Voltaren, I'm sure I'm allergy. So what is your advice?
Yeah. So the contraindication is having a serious allergy that required hospital admission and then requiring emergency management. The general allergies still It's okay. So there are no cut and dry rules. What you can do is, you can basically, when you go for vaccination, you can tell your doctor. Then what they do is they arrange emergency cover. Like, they arrange the emergency doctor who will be attending if there is an allergy occurs. So still it is possible. There are many occasions where those who have histories of allergies were given vaccination under emergency cover. And very rarely there were problems. Most of the time there was no problem at all. So I think that should be the same pathway that you can take as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So there is no problem, no?
Well,
I can
I have a question.
I'm not saying there's no problem. There's risk is always there. But again, benefit outweighs the risk. And the best way is to get the medical advice, and they will assess you and tell whether it is advisable for you to get the vaccine under emergency cover. But emergency cover is a must.
Thank you very much.
So you better get your vaccination in a hospital.
Exactly.
Setting.
Professor,
Thank you.
can I get a chance to ask a question?
Yes.
May I
Yeah,
get
sure.
a chance?
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
If I am vaccinated with AstraZeneca, if I can't get the second dose, what shall I do, doctor? If I can't get the second dose on time.
My answer will not be ideal, but hopefully there may be some doses of AstraZeneca is coming. So that's all that we can do at the moment. I know that's not the ideal answer, because actually initially there were some kind of policy decisions that were not correct. Initially there was a clear-cut rollout plan for the vaccines. There was a priority list, but later there were a lot of influences, and even when there were clear instructions to keep the 50% of what was available, that 50% was also used up, hoping that the next dose will come. But then the India situation got worsened. So all these are beyond our control. And now we can't blame the past, what has happened. I was just trying to explain what has happened. So what we can do is hoping that the next dose will come. I think authorities are very much aware of this situation. They are definitely.
But can't we go the Sinopharm?
They are very much aware.
Can't we get for Sinopharm 2 doses new? Professor,
no,
can't we get Sinopharm?
No. 2 doses new. No, again, there is no recommendation at the moment, because we are talking about the immune system. No, so immune system has already started functioning. So the way the Sinopharm acts is entirely different from AstraZeneca acts. So at the moment, there is no data on mixing. If the data becomes available, there might be a decision, no recommendation. But at the moment, there is no such recommendation. We have to act on the available data. That's the situation.
After a certain period of time, when we get AstraZeneca, after 3 months' time or some period of time, can't we get?
Yeah, again, nobody knows. Because there is no data on such kind of approaches. So, all these things are under study. They have been studied. All these possibilities are being evaluated and considered. But currently, no authority can give approval, because adequate data is not available.
Okay, thank you.
Right, okay. So we are getting up. Governor Amita, you have a question? The last question.
No, it is okay. I will give the remarks, yes.
Okay, so thank you, Professor Indika, for sharing us your expertise and also answering a barrage of questions. And so let me now call upon our district governor and Dr. Amita Jayawardena to do the closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, this was a very useful and meaningful webinar that I could understand that the importance of webinar on the COVID-19 vaccination. That was at the when we are preparing for the webinar. Of course, I was thinking little way, but when I completed the program only, I realized how important. There are a lot of questions to be answered, lot of education is needed, and lot of awareness is needed. I understood that Professor Indika Karunathilaka, he was done his best, and we got a lot of information. He initiated with basic clarification of the viruses, and it is a DNA, RNA virus, and he explained about about how it is for proliferations and pathophysical process and everything. And we were able to identify how it is react when the vaccine is formed, and when the vaccine is inserted to the body, what is the process inside the body. And not only that, even the regulatory process he was explaining about, though the process is shortened, that is all the process were continued for the releasing the vaccination, and though it is short-term releasing, and they have completed almost all the requirement in the process. So we have the confidence of the vaccine, and also, as you mentioned, the risk and the benefit analysis provide us that it is very important. And as you very clearly mentioned, it is better to give about 90% of the population to maintain the herd immunity. But at least as much as possible, we have to get the vaccination. There are some people, of course, they are reluctant to take the vaccination, though it is available in some part of the country. I'm very aware that they are scared, but a lot of clarifications came from your presentation, Professor, and this is very valuable, and every one of us got a very clear idea, and you were very presented it in very simplified manner. Thank you very much, Professor, for giving these ideas, and thank you very much, Dr. Sarath Samarage. He is assured to our alliance, and also that he gives a lot of the directions for us to get the health benefit. And today also he organized, he moderate the session in such a way and got whatever we need for our awareness. Then we started the program at 7 o'clock with the International President Mahendra Amarasuriya. Actually, he was explaining very nicely how the organization was initiated, how it is benefited to the society, and the usefulness of this the membership, and how it was benefited to Sri Lanka as well, and not only to the community but also to the Lion as a member. The organization was provided them to excel in presenting things and handling the meeting, so on. So he was given very valuable ideas for us, and then again the IPDG was given the opportunity explain introduce the international president, and there were a lot of lions and non-lions and some other participants as well. And thank you very much for your all contribution, and it was very successful with the question and answer session. Also, we clarified almost all the questions, and whenever we need, we can talk to the professor once again and get an idea, because he is very close to Governor Upali also, and he is working in the OPA as well. So he is supporting to the community with his knowledge. So we have in touch with, we can have the discussion thereafter always. And so I may not take much time. We were supposed to finish by 7:10 nearly, and I kindly we have another session 27th, another webinar, that is ධර්මදේශනයක් වෙසක් වෙනුවෙන් තමයි අපි මේ webinar එක organize කරන්නේ. ඒ පිළිබඳවත් ඔබට යථා නුදුරු දවස්වලදීම අපි දැනුම් දෙනවා. ඒ වගේම මම මේ අවස්ථාවේ දැන් කාරුණිකව ඉල්ලනවා අපේ ගවර්නර් ඉලේ මාශංක බගිරදන්ට vote of thanks deliver කරන්න කියලා. Thank you very much. Over to you, Uma. Governor Uma.
Good evening. Thank you, Governor, for giving me this wonderful opportunity to propose the vote of thanks. I think you have done most of the thanking part, so it made my life easy to propose the vote of thanks. Firstly, I like to thank the Professor Indika Karunatilaka for enlightening us on the corona vaccine. and educating us more on the corona, which I think we were having lack of knowledge because we were not that into medical thing, but it was very easy, and you explained to it very easily to us, sir. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for being with us on your busy schedule and your time. And I'd like to thank our lion, Dr. Sarath Samarage, for making this webinar session a reality, because we were having closed downs and lions were thinking what we have to do, but bringing this webinar is a wonderful thing, sir. Thank you very much to you. And I also like to thank Governor Upali, who was also a person who initiated this with Dr. Samarage. Thank you, Governor, for your support and bringing us all together to this program. And I also like to thank our past international president, Mahendra Amarasuriya, for enlightening all the new people who are participating through Zoom what the LANism all about and how it came to Sri Lanka and what we do to the community. Thank you, sir, once again for enlightening to the new people who are participating from Zoom what the LANism all about. I also like to thank all the LANs and the participants who joined the Zoom. Without y'all, this webinar wouldn't be a success. Thank you very much for joining in. And I also like to thank Dr. Our district governor for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much. And I also like to say, to remember the date 27th, the information 27th of May, there'll be emails coming down for the next webinar. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. Stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, First Vice Governor-elect Umar Shankar Bhagiradan, for the vote of thanks. And this session has been recorded, so we will be uploading it and share with all the lions in the district. And let me wind up with this short video, especially for the prospective lions who are interested in joining lions. Thank you all.
Yeah, let me thank Amindika Samaravikrama and the Cabinet Secretary Hiroshi Bindueva, and the technical support given by the engineer Gimhan Jayasiri. Thank you very much.
Being a lion to me means doing all I can to make people around me very happy.
It gives me the opportunity to serve.
We are so excited about the work that we do in the community.
Get satisfaction from making a difference in someone else's life.
Pretty proud to be a Lions member.
Están en este movimiento porque te hace crecer como persona.
And